A narrow room, a red cloth, a lily resting on a pile of books, a palm branch crossing the wall like a quiet announcement. Outside, a man tends a vine. Inside, a young girl sits beside her mother and works a needle through the cloth. An angel watches. Timber, thread, leaves, hands. Every object means something, yet every object remains stubbornly itself. The year is 1849. The painting is Dante Gabriel Rossetti's The Girlhood of Mary Virgin. His mother and sister served as models. The room feels intimate because it was born from intimacy. Family has entered the work before the public has even seen it. Beneath the painting appear three letters: P.R.B. Nobody outside a small circle of young artists knows what they mean. The letters belong to the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, 7 men united by the conviction that British painting had forgotten how to see. The Royal Academy had become a factory for theatrical gestures, brown varnish, inherited formulas, and sacred figures who looked as if they had been instructed never to perspire. The Brotherhood proposed something harder. They would study nature closely. They would recover luminous color. They would read medieval poetry, scripture, legend, and history. They would demand technical discipline from one another. They would place physical reality back inside sacred art. Then they would sign the result with 3 mysterious letters. The Pre-Raphaelites are remembered today for copper hair, dense flowers, jeweled color, medieval clothing, pale women, and the peculiar Victorian habit of making every beautiful afternoon appear moments away from an elegant death. Their deeper achievement lies elsewhere. They discovered how private dissatisfaction becomes a movement. Modern aesthetic subcultures rarely suffer from a shortage of admirers. Goth, dark academia, medieval revivalism, fantasy art, cottagecore, and their many cousins can gather enormous audiences. A photograph of a candlelit library may cross the planet before the candle has finished burning. Recognition spreads quickly, mastery does not. 1 million people may admire a medieval table while knowing no carpenter who could build it. They may save photographs of embroidered hangings while knowing no weaver. They may recognize a Gothic chapel but remain unable to explain its proportions, carve its ornament, repair its stone, or name the theology that ordered its symbols. The audience possesses the atmosphere. It does not possess the means of production. That condition produces consumers without apprentices, influencers without critics, merchandise without workshops, and followers without membership. An aesthetic becomes a floating collection of signs. Everyone recognizes it. Few can make it. Fewer still can teach it. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood began in September 1848 at the Millais family home in London. Its 3 central founders were John Everett Millais, William Holman Hunt, and Dante Gabriel Rossetti. William Michael Rossetti, James Collinson, Frederick George Stevens, and Thomas Woolner soon joined them. 7 men. Millais possessed astonishing technical gifts. Hunt supplied moral severity and persistence. Rossetti brought poetry, medieval romance, religious imagery, and a magnificent ability to make every friendship slightly more complicated than necessary. They had different temperaments and different talents. They shared a judgment. British painting had grown false. Their initials converted that judgment into allegiance. P.R.B. did more than provoke curiosity. The mark announced that each member had placed his reputation behind a common standard. Anyone could imitate a surface. Membership implied obligation. That distinction separates a movement from a demographic. An aesthetic audience may wear similar clothing, listen to the same music, and fill its rooms with related objects. A brotherhood can demand better work. Its members assign study. They criticize one another. They arrange exhibitions. They make introductions. They remember what was promised. They identify failure before the public discovers it at full price. Friendship gives the circle warmth. Discipline gives it a future. Older European culture produced art through such bodies as a matter of course. Workshops trained painters and sculptors. Guilds guarded methods and standards. Monasteries maintained scriptoria. Courts gathered artists, scholars, musicians, patrons, and craftsmen around a shared order. The cult of the solitary genius concealed much of this social machinery. Even the great romantics traveled in circles, borrowed money from friends, criticized one another's drafts, and quarreled in packs. The solitary genius often had a crowded sitting room and several unpaid bills. A serious aesthetic circle does not need hundreds of members. 5 to 8 people will do. It needs a name, a rule of admission, a shared course of study, regular criticism, and finished work carrying a collective mark. The number matters less than the obligation. The first meeting may be held together by enthusiasm. The second must be justified by work. The Brotherhood's revolt succeeded because its members could name what had gone wrong. They did not merely announce that modern art was ugly. They identified the habits producing its ugliness. They reserved special contempt for Sir Joshua Reynolds, the first president of the Royal Academy. They called him Sir Sloshua, mocking the loose handling and brown tonal manner associated with academic painting. Young men have always enjoyed renaming their elders. Once in a great while, the nickname comes attached to a serious diagnosis. The words before Raphael can mislead. The Brotherhood did not believe Raphael lacked talent. They objected to the formulas hardened by his successors. They found greater honesty in late medieval and early Renaissance painting. Those earlier works offered lucid color, direct composition, religious seriousness, and careful attention to the visible world. The Pre-Raphaelites were not asking Europe to forget perspective. They were asking painters to stop using inherited technique as a curtain behind which nobody had to look carefully. Millet made the accusation visible in Christ in the House of His Parents. The Holy Family appears inside a working carpenter's shop. Wood shavings cover the floor. Joseph's hands show the marks of labor. The young Christ has cut his palm on a nail, and blood falls onto his foot. Sheep press outside the doorway. Timber, tools, and unfinished work crowd the room. Charles Dickens hated it. Mary looked too ordinary. Joseph appeared too rough. The workshop seemed dirty. The painting offended viewers because it restored physical weight to the incarnation. Holiness had entered an actual shop where boards warped, hands cracked, and nobody had informed the sawdust that it was appearing in religious art. This was more than provocation. The painting contained a precise rebuke to an artistic culture that had made sacred history decorous by making it unreal. A revolt acquires force when every complaint implies a curriculum. Brown tonal habits called for the study of clear color. Stock gestures called for close observation of real bodies. Sentimental sacred figures called for theology and honest models. Borrowed compositions called for renewed drawing. Vague scenery called for work outdoors. Complaint became study. That principle applies to every aesthetic community that wishes to grow beyond merchandise. Goth cannot mature by calling modern architecture soulless. That judgment may be true, but truth without skill remains unemployed. A serious Gothic revival must recover masonry, tracery, proportion, ironwork, stained glass, carving, and the religious order that gave those forms their hierarchy. Dark academia cannot answer the fluorescent classroom by purchasing one more tartan skirt and arranging a cup of coffee beside an unread book. It must recover disciplined reading, ordered conversation, learned friendship, beautiful libraries, and the duties owed to knowledge. Fantasy art cannot live forever on portraits of armored warriors who seem never to have encountered a blacksmith. Somebody must learn metal. Somebody must study horses. Somebody must understand what a fortress wall is defending and why its staircases turn the way they do. A mature circle writes an indictment and then turns each accusation into assigned labor. Bad synthetic fabric leads to textile study. Weak drawing leads to anatomy. Empty symbolism leads to iconography. Historical pastiche leads to direct study of old garments, buildings, and tools. The manifesto must become a syllabus before indignation turns into theater. The Pre-Raphaelites also believed nature could be read. A lily could signify purity without ceasing to be a particular lily. Timber could recall the cross while remaining the material of a carpenter. The natural object did not become less physical because it carried meaning. This union of observation and symbolism reached its most famous form in Millet's Ophelia. Millet painted the background beside the Hogsmill River in Surrey. He worked outdoors for months, contending with weather, insects, changing light, and the generally insubordinate habits of English vegetation. The plants were rendered so carefully that botanists can identify them. The scene appears abundant, but its abundance is ordered. Poppies suggest death. Daisies carry innocence. Violets recall faithfulness and early death. Forget-me-nots introduce another layer of memory. Shakespearean tragedy, botanical study, Christian symbolism, and the exact life of an English riverbank meet in one image. Nothing has been thrown into the water merely because it looked suitably wistful. Elizabeth Siddal posed as Ophelia in a bathtub warmed by lamps. The lamps went out. Millet continued painting while the water cooled. Siddal became ill. The story entered artistic legend, where needless suffering is often fitted with velvet curtains and promoted as evidence of seriousness. Its moral is plainer. A beautiful result does not excuse careless treatment of the person whose freezing body made it possible. Artists have an alarming gift for renaming preventable misery the process. Ophelia remains a rebuke to contemporary image production because its visual power came from the meeting of several kinds of knowledge. A machine can produce a pale, red-haired woman floating among flowers in seconds. A photographer can gather the familiar signs: copper hair, embroidered dress, sorrowful gaze, jeweled light, abundant foliage. The resemblance may be immediate. The knowledge is absent. Surface recognition supplies no understanding of botany, Shakespeare, pigment, anatomy, fabric, sacred symbolism, or death. Millet's accomplishment arose because each field gave direction to the others. Observation kept symbolism from becoming a code pasted onto dead scenery. The inherited story prevented detail from becoming mere inventory. Style emerged from disciplined habits. The Pre-Raphaelites worked over bright grounds. They used brilliant pigments. They studied outdoors. They researched clothing. They copied natural forms. They drew constantly. Their work acquired a family likeness because the artists submitted themselves to related demands. A filter creates resemblance. Discipline creates lineage. A contemporary Goth painter could follow the same severity without copying a single Pre-Raphaelite composition. Study funerary sculpture closely enough to distinguish mourning customs by century. Draw drapery until the folds respond to weight. Learn how candlelight changes flesh, metal, velvet, and stone. Read the prayers once spoken before the tombs, now borrowed as scenery. Visit a church when nobody is taking photographs. The artist needs a rule of life. Weekly drawing, repeated material study, architectural sketching, close copying from a chosen master. Work outdoors as the seasons change. The model, seamstress, assistant, printer, and craftsman must also be treated as participants. Their bodies and labor place duties upon the artist. Truth to nature was never passive looking. It was trained attention joined to moral responsibility. The Brotherhood understood another requirement. A school must explain itself before hostile critics explain it badly. In 1850, its members began publishing The Germ, a journal devoted to poetry, fiction, criticism, and the principles behind their art. It survived for 4 issues. Commercially, this was a dignified collision with the furniture. Culturally, it mattered. The journal allowed the Brotherhood to speak beyond painted surfaces. It named artistic ancestors, clarified doctrine, printed new work, and placed visual art inside a larger intellectual cause. William Michael Rossetti served as editor and recorder. His role reveals a truth aesthetic circles prefer to learn late. The person who edits manuscripts, keeps minutes, preserves letters, remembers decisions, and records authorship may shape a movement as deeply as its most famous painter. Without such work, memory becomes a fog occupied chiefly by the founders' preferred account of what happened. The Brotherhood also found a public defender in John Ruskin. After critics attacked the paintings, Ruskin wrote to the Times in their support. He did not approve of everything they made. His later relations with the circle became so tangled that a Victorian novelist might have rejected the plot as excessive. Yet he recognized their attention to nature and placed their craftsmanship within a moral account of labor. A movement needs artists, but it also needs editors, historians, critics, photographers, patrons, scholars, and organizers. Somebody must examine the sacred claims. Somebody must document the finished work. Somebody must convince 8 artistic personalities to occupy the same room before the exhibition closes. Online subcultures have reversed the proper order. Commentary is abundant. Durable work is scarce. People explain an aesthetic they have never practiced. Then they explain one another's explanations. Soon the original object has vanished beneath a hill of captions, while everyone congratulates himself for having developed a personal relationship with the algorithm. A serious journal returns attention to made things. It publishes a new painting, a poem worth rereading, a translation, a bookbinder's workshop notes, a study of church ornament, or the record of a completed commission. It recovers neglected sources. It identifies contemporary excellence. It corrects fashionable errors. It leaves evidence that the circle built something. Publication also preserves standards. A movement that leaves no records eventually becomes whatever its least careful admirer says it was. Taste requires distinction. An editor must be willing to say that one work understands medieval composition, while another has placed a woman in velvet beside an arch and trusted history to finish the job. Artists working separately may appear as curiosities. Artists publishing together reveal a school. Their arguments invite collectors, defenders, students, and patrons into a structure larger than a single personality. Every serious movement needs someone to build its memory before nostalgia arrives and falsifies it. Memory alone will not pay for paint. The Pre-Raphaelites needed buyers. Models, studios, travel, frames, printing, and time cost money. The spiritual dignity of art has never persuaded a landlord to waive the rent. One may resent this arrangement without acting surprised each month. Thomas Combe, superintendent of the Oxford University Press, became an early patron of Millais and Hunt. Ruskin supplied money, introductions, and public defense. Later collectors bought major works by Rossetti and Edward Burne-Jones. Patronage gave artists time to attempt difficult work. A capable patron does more than purchase a finished picture. He may finance preparatory drawings, commission an unfashionable sacred subject, send an artist abroad to study architecture, connect a painter with a carver, or support an apprentice through the years when skill grows faster than income. Modern culture prefers the flattering fiction that artists succeed through exposure. Exposure is frequently the art world's tender name for unpaid labor. Serious work requires payment. Payment requires clear terms. A contemporary patron circle could begin with 10 households funding one substantial commission each year. Perhaps they commission stained glass for a chapel, a carved memorial, an illuminated book, or the furnishing of a reading room. The artist submits drawings. The patrons set written requirements. Payment follows stages of completed work. The process is recorded. Both sides acquire duties. The artist must deliver craftsmanship rather than attitude. The patron must study enough to commission intelligently. Money without taste produces expensive clutter. Taste without money produces a superb folder of saved images. Popularity presents another danger. The market learns quickly how to extract the visible signs of a style while discarding the discipline beneath them. Pre-Raphaelite imagery became fashionable. Sellers could reproduce the maiden, the flowers, the medieval garment, and the luxuriant surface. The beliefs, scholarship, and technical severity were more troublesome. They did not fit easily inside a shop window. Luxury Goth faces the same temptation. Silver, velvet, carved furniture, and stained glass may support fine work. A high price proves only that a seller has found someone willing to pay it. The costly plastic bat remains a plastic bat, though it now carries itself like minor nobility. The healthier model is stewardship. A patron accepts part of the cost of bringing worthy work into being. Repeated commissions give the artist enough stability to attempt harder pieces. The patron gains a share in the creation of public inheritance. That support must reach beyond celebrated painters. Printers, framers, weavers, restorers, editors, and carvers keep a school alive. Cultural authority belongs partly to the person who recognizes talent early, pays its bills, and introduces its maker to the next patron. Admiration becomes serious when it accepts responsibility. The Pre-Raphaelite vision reached its greatest power when it escaped the frame. A painting can reveal a world. A room requires someone to live within it. The second generation carried the movement into furniture, wallpaper, embroidery, stained glass, metalwork, books, gardens, and architecture. Burne-Jones extended its dreamlike religious and legendary imagery. William Morris gave it workshops and households. In 1861, Morris joined Philip Webb, Rossetti, Ford Madox Brown, and others to form a decorative arts company. They produced stained glass, textiles, furniture, painted ornament, wallpaper, and metalwork. Their purpose reached beyond attaching medieval decorations to factory-made objects. Morris wanted to repair the relationship between the maker, the material, and the finished thing. Red House offered architectural proof. Philip Webb designed it for Morris and his wife Jane. Friends helped furnish it. Its brick walls, built-in furniture, painted tiles, textiles, stained glass, garden, and structure belonged to one coherent vision. The house was a social act made habitable. This marks the passage from subculture toward high culture. A subculture usually begins with portable signs because its members control little property. Clothing, jewelry, records, posters, and bedroom decorations allow a person to carry a small world through surroundings designed by somebody else. That beginning is understandable. Remaining there forever is an admission of impotence. Goth matures when it can furnish a chapel, a library, a memorial hall, a garden, or a house. Dark academia matures when it creates a serious school, keeps an archive, publishes learned books, and builds rooms where study becomes a common discipline. Fantasy art matures when it produces sculpture, metalwork, music, ceremony, and architecture. A local circle could choose one complete room each year. A church reading room would suffice. One person designs the shelves, another carves the ornament, a bookbinder restores the volumes, a textile artist makes the curtains, a painter creates a historical panel, a patron pays for the materials. The group records the plans, expenses, mistakes, and finished result. A total room permits fewer evasions than a mood board. The colors must relate, symbols must agree, materials must suit their purpose. Furniture must support the human body instead of looking magnificent for 11 seconds on a screen. The room reveals whether the aesthetic possesses internal order. Beauty enters ordinary life through trained hands. An aesthetic becomes culture when it can build the room in which its people read, eat, mourn, pray, and welcome strangers. Yet no movement matures while treating half its participants as scenery. Elizabeth Siddal's face became one of the defining faces of Pre-Raphaelite art. She appeared as heroines, saints, and doomed women. Her own drawings and poems received far less attention. She entered history first as an appearance, and only later as a maker. Siddal came from a working-class family. She studied art under Rossetti, received support from Ruskin, exhibited drawings, and wrote severe melancholy poems. Her work deserves judgment on its own terms. Turning her into a romantic victim obscures her. Turning her into a slogan obscures her again. Christina Rossetti occupied a different place. Her poetry joined sensuous imagery with religious severity, temptation, renunciation, death, sisterhood, and divine love. Jane Morris became famous through Rossetti's portraits, yet she was also a skilled embroiderer who supervised work for Morris and Company. Georgiana Burne-Jones painted and engraved before domestic responsibilities narrowed her practice, then preserved a priceless record of the circle. May Morris became a master of embroidery, design, and teaching. The lesson reaches beyond restoring neglected names. Artistic movements often assign visible authorship to one kind of participant while concealing the labor of another. Models lend their bodies, seamstresses construct the garments, assistants prepare materials, editors repair the prose, wives keep the household in which meetings occur, patrons maintain the studio. The finished object receives one signature. A durable school must record authorship carefully. Exhibition labels should name the maker of the garment, frame, embroidery, photograph, or setting when that work materially shaped the result. Archives should keep contracts, patterns, correspondence, and preparatory drawings. Memory should follow labor. Painting, modeling, editing, embroidery, and patronage remain different arts. Fairness does not require pretending they are identical. It requires naming each contribution accurately and judging it by the standard proper to it. A modern aesthetic circle should train people rather than arrange them as living accessories. The woman in the medieval gown may be a historian, painter, singer, patron, or textile artist. If the group values her chiefly because she improves its photographs, it is found at a costume party with bylaws. Beautiful confinement remains confinement, even when the wallpaper is Morris. The original Brotherhood dissolved after a few years. The imagery survived. Copper hair, jeweled color, medieval garments, sacred melancholy, fatal rivers, and rooms heavy with workmanship entered British taste. The influence passed into illustration, decorative art, fantasy painting, fashion photography, cinema, and online imagery. A person can recognize the style instantly, without knowing the name of one member. That survival proves the strength of the visual language. These works disclose a world people still desire. Nature carries meaning. Sorrow retains dignity. Clothing bears ceremony. Sacred history enters visible life. Beauty demands sustained attention. Yet the tradition weakened as its appearance traveled. Botanical study became floral abundance. Theology became atmosphere. Historical research became medieval-inspired. Brotherhood became fandom. Craft became merchandise. The style kept its furniture while quietly evicting its beliefs. William Morris patterns now cover wallpaper, notebooks, mugs, bags, and museum shop goods. These objects can lead an admirer toward the source. They can also reduce a philosophy of labor and beauty to a pleasant surface printed by methods Morris would have regarded with suspicion. Online circulation strips context even faster. A painting moves without its title, date, subject, material, or owner. A sacred scene becomes ethereal woman. A tragic heroine becomes dark feminine energy. A work rooted in scripture, Shakespeare or Dante, becomes a mood filed beside cosmetic advertisements. The algorithm is an energetic curator with the education of a moth. The answer is a canon. A movement must name its masterworks and explain why they matter. The maker, date, medium, subject, sources, symbols, technique, patron, and later influence should travel with the image. Admiration becomes taste when the viewer learns to distinguish excellence from resemblance. A canon also permits rejection. Every red-haired woman surrounded by flowers does not deserve preservation. Some works deepen a tradition, others repeat its signals. A mature school must tell the difference. Taste treated as wholly private cannot sustain teaching or apprenticeship. Nobody can hand down a standard while insisting that all judgments are merely personal reactions wearing spectacles. A style survives through repetition. A tradition survives by knowing what deserves repetition and what must be created anew. A brotherhood for the present age should not begin by copying Rossetti's women or Millet's riverbanks. It should recover the structure that made those works possible. A small circle gathers around a written purpose. Its members practice distinct crafts. They study together. They criticize finished work. They publish a journal. They seek patrons. They train apprentices. Each year they complete something larger than any individual contribution. The old brotherhood's failures deserve equal attention. Charismatic disorder consumed time and damaged people. Romantic entanglements strained friendships and marriages. Authority remained vague. Money produced dependency. Personal loyalty interfered with judgment. The mythology of the gifted personality sometimes outran the ordinary business of finishing the work. Artistic people remain human beings, nature's little precaution against any salon becoming excessively majestic. A present circle needs rules for admission, dismissal, money, attribution, criticism, and disputes. Friendship and judgment must coexist without being confused. Members should finish work before announcing another manifesto. The world possesses enough declarations written by people who cannot complete a chair. The circle also requires a center higher than private feeling. The Pre-Raphaelites differed in belief, but their strongest works came from a world in which nature, history, beauty, sacrifice, and moral action carried meaning. Even secular medievalism borrowed its majesty from a civilization ordered toward the altar. A tool belongs in the hand. It does not belong on the altar. The same is true of an aesthetic. It can organize perception, train attention, and give visible form to love. Once reduced to personal branding, it begins feeding upon the people who once hoped it would give them a home. The mature movement seeks public consequence. It furnishes churches. It restores neglected rooms. It prints beautiful books. It keeps workshops. It commissions memorials. It teaches children. It gives the dead dignified markers and the living places worth remembering. It preserves before replacing. Morris helped establish the Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings because he understood that careless restoration could destroy the inheritance it claimed to honor. The old building must be studied before the modern restorer scratches his initials across history and calls the result renewal. Repair what must be repaired. Preserve what still speaks. Resist the vanity of remaking the past in the image of the current season. Then create. Return to that narrow room in Rossetti's painting. The girl bends over the red cloth. Her mother guides the work. The lily rests upon the books. Her father tends the vine outside. The angel waits nearby. The models came from the painter's family. The objects belong to a shared symbolic language. The subject comes from sacred history. The work bears the mark of a brotherhood. Family, craft, study, devotion, and collective purpose meet within one canvas. The letters P.R.B. mattered because labor stood behind them. Modern aesthetic communities need their own letters. The letters themselves are easy. 3 minutes with a notebook will produce a splendid acronym and, if one is unfortunate, a merchandise plan. The work behind the letters is harder. Spectators must become apprentices. Customers must become patrons. Saved images must become built rooms. Vague belonging must take the form of ordered fellowship. Taste must submit itself to correction. Admiration must accept expense. Friendship must survive judgment. A tradition is not preserved by placing its symbols beneath glass. It survives when living people receive its demands, master its tools, and create work that can stand without quotation marks around it. The goal is not to reconstruct Victorian England. We have no need to place red-haired maidens in every available river. The goal is to recover the cultural machinery through which a shared vision becomes paint, stone, glass, cloth, song, ceremony, and shelter. The Pre-Raphaelites began with 7 young men gathered in a family sitting room. Their descendants furnished houses, churches, books, and dreams. A new school may begin with equally little. A name, a room, a rule, several demanding friends. One finished work worthy of the signature beneath it. And there, beneath the mark, the red thread passes through the cloth once more. A grand world awaits.